Hi, everybody. Welcome. The big question today is atheism dead? And so I've got an atheist friends, atheist people I know. So people who profess that they are atheists, they're not dead. So perhaps atheism is not dead. But we can have this conversation today and we can talk about how atheism reconciles this idea that we have objective morality, because it doesn't. It doesn't it can't explain fully the source of our objective morality. And so we're also going to talk about that today. But before we do, I want to let you know this is also going to be an open dialogue. So I'm going to post a link. In fact, I will go ahead and post this link right here. Hold on one second. Invite. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and post a link into the chat. So if anyone would like to join me, you're welcome. There we go. Okay, so another thing I just wanted to let you know is something that I want to say that God has let us know. So in the book of Romans, it says in Romans 2:15, which is a pretty important verse, but also going up to it, for it is not those who hear the law who are righteous in God's sight, but it is those who obey the law who will be declared righteous. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them and other times even defending them. And so this idea of morality and a conscience, those are all pretty important things. And it's throughout the Bible. The book of Hebrews I was just listening to this morning. And in the book of Hebrews, God also mentions how he implanted us with a conscience. So I want to say welcome to Nathan. How are you, Nathan?
Hey, SJ, just checking I had the right mic plugged in. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well now. I have to admit, I heard you yesterday on your channel. I was listening there for a while. I don't know if you saw me in the chat.
I did see you in the chat. Were you in the car driving?
Yeah, I wasn't driving. I was being driven.
With making your family listen as well.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. No, I have earphones so that they don't have to. Yeah, I actually sit in the back seat when we drive. I'm a backseat driver. My husband's in the front with my oldest son, and then I always sit in the back seat with my youngest son, because if my two sons are in the back, they fight with each other. So
okay.
And then, I mean, this is crazy. They're 15, 16, and they're fighting, but that's what happens. So yeah, no, it's all good. So your chat, actually, I have to say, I listened to that and I agreed with some of the points. I think that I'm glad that Capturing Christianity, Cameron decided to take down the stuff that he had put up with respect to his ministry.
I actually think he should have left it up in order to not be hiding anything, and then apologized for it. And then I also think, and I think this applies to the Christian doctrine of repentance as well in general, that a genuine apology implies that you actually accept that you've done something wrong and you intend to try not to do it again. So it seems kind of weird to apologize and then literally a few hours later be like, oh, I didn't actually do anything wrong though. So I'm happy part way that at least he kind of owned up to what, but it seems it was kind of like a bit, it was like one of those, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way apologies, rather than yeah, I did actually goof up. I'm sorry, I could have done it differently. It was like no, you're I'm sorry you feel that way, but if you're so hurt, I'll take it. And so I'm not 100% happy about it still, but yeah, that's the nature of it.
You did say something. You just said something that I think we should talk about even a little bit more, is what you just said, the Christian idea of repentance. And also yesterday, I heard you say that you were, quote, I think it was this, exploring Christianity. And so I was curious to see if you wanted to expand on that at all.
Well, I mean, I've been to, I've been going to an Eastern Orthodox church for a while now, and have been there this morning. I don't know. I mean, I probably need a more specific question, but I could just fire off what I'm thinking about things in general, which is, I guess, that I'm really interested in things like philosophy of religion, the history of Christianity. I like reading the Bible, studying it. The ethical teachings of Jesus are a real guide for my life. So I kind of just thought I'd rather engage with that whole tradition as someone who identifies within Christianity, as I'm trying to contribute to the thing going forward, than as someone who's opposed to it. Because I don't think I'm opposed to it in the way that people like the atheist experience and so forth would want to sort of define themselves as, like it would be a good thing if this thing was entirely wiped out. Whereas I don't kind of think that way. I'm almost, I suppose my position is almost a kind of reform stance. I just want people's positions and things to change on the way that they think about and look at certain questions. I think there's a better way of doing things.
Yeah. Well, let me actually, I also want to say hi to the people in the chat, because I just got a conversation here going. So all I want to say for Nathan, I'm very, very happy to see that you're exploring Christianity. I think that this is awesome because you're young. You have so many years ahead of you. And I didn't really come back myself until I was in my early 40s. And so I feel like I missed out a lot of years that I could have been out there making a difference and thinking about spreading the word. And so I'm super happy that here's a man in his 20s who's working towards the truth. You really just want to know the truth, and however it may lay out, and you're going to church. And I think that's absolutely incredible. So I also want to say hi to Taking Back Eden and P. Mars. There's a little conversation going on here. And I know that Nathan, since this is also on Christianity, we can both talk about this, but they're talking about the parables.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I'll turn my camera off a second while I eat some food, just so it doesn't I'm not like eating in front of everyone.
Okay. No worries. But he says, I see Taking Back Eden, that's John, my friend, and P. Mars, but talking about the different parables. And I just wanted to say, P. Mars is saying that some of these parables are not exemplifying God's justice or God's morality. And I would say that all of them exemplify him. And one of the ones that he brought up is the prodigal son. And I have to admit, when I was young, I didn't understand the prodigal son. And because I was wondering, why is the older brother sort of why wasn't he celebrated? And so let me just say what that is. So the prodigal son is this younger son, asked for his inheritance early. Then he runs off and he blows it all, living in a licentious way. And he blows everything. And he realizes suddenly that he has no money. There was a great famine that came into the area where he was. He ran out of all of his money, and he started eating the kind of food that was given to the pigs. And he realized, wait a second, I could go back, and my father's servants are doing much better than I am. Why don't I go back to my father and ask to be one of his servants? And so as he was heading back to see his father caught him in the distance and spotted him and got very excited. So he decided to celebrate that he was coming back. And so he threw a big celebration, and he got this gigantic fatted calf, and they were going to be eating that in celebration that the younger son had come back and repented of his ways. And so when he got back, the older son said, wait a second, why does he get the fatted calf? How come I've never been celebrated? Here I've been with you the whole time. And God uses that as the example of sort of like the lost sheep that goes away. People celebrate greatly when the lost sheep comes back. But he told the older son, you've always been with me. And so it's one of those things where the older son was showing his own indignation at the younger son, and also was trying to be very self-righteous. And that's the way that my pastors have been teaching that. He talk about his self-righteousness, and self-righteousness is something that God does not appreciate. And Job showed his self-righteousness too. And that's one of the reasons why that was brought out when everything was taken away from Job. And so, Nathan, have you finished eating yet?
I'm about halfway through, but
you're a quick eater.
I've only got something small. It's not like a big meal or anything. I'm broadly in agreement with what you're saying there. I'm just struggling to think and try and understand what P. Mars is actually saying, like how that could be interpreted as God being against morality, which seems like a very strange statement to me. But maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something I'm missing in the story.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people say, well, why is it that the person who's been there, it's a lot of it has to do with self-righteousness in a lot of this, and so that's an issue. And so,
but I think it's I guess if someone doesn't see self-righteousness as good, but if maybe I don't know, maybe P. Mars is coming from a place where being self-righteous is good. It's like, they're the people with the truth or something. I don't know. Moe's here, he can say for himself.
Yeah, is it P. Mars? Hello. Or N. Mars. Are you there? I don't know if he's got his microphone. It looks like he's got his microphone on mute right now.
I had to get my microphone.
Okay.
It's like on my lap. So, so yeah, the point I was making was that in the prodigal son, the one who's made an example of is the good son, like you said. Like, the father like doesn't punish the prodigal son, right? And not even does he not punish him, he throws a feast, so he rewards the prodigal son for seemingly doing evil or sin, right?
I disagree at that point, because I'd say the punishment in itself was the type of person he became through sort of sin. Sin affected his character in a way that he ended up in a lot in life where he's eating, the pig food. So I'd say that's the punishment.
Well, it seems to me like the good son, the moral son, the one who did what the father wanted, he was like, like self-righteous is a good word. He was like, the father, you should punish him, right? Like, that's what I think. The good son wanted his prodigal son brother to be punished for what he did, and he was upset that the father threw a feast instead of punishing him. So it's like he's admonishing, I think, moralist people like the Pharisees, who they think, they're self-righteous. They're like, I follow the law perfectly, and look at this person, they don't follow the law. What a scumbag they are, right? So it's like that type of attitude is awful, and that's what Jesus was criticizing moral people more than anything. I
think where the confusion is because you said the parables against morality. I think we assumed that what you meant by that is morality in the sense of like good moral things, like like the Christianity is opposed to good moral facts or something. Whereas that's not what you meant is more like moralizers, like people who are self-righteous and stuff, which is a morally bad thing to be. So that is immoral. And so if you accept that story, you can say, you're against immorality. But the type of immorality is people who are being moralists, which doesn't mean, I think that's where the confusion crept in.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because I think that is what I like that, and I can see, I want to point out something with the Pharisees that I think is interesting. All throughout the Gospels, the main people that Jesus went after were the Pharisees. And so here he was rubbing elbows with the tax collectors and the prostitutes and all that kind of stuff. And he goes after the self-righteous Pharisees, and he says how they give alms and they want to do it in braggadocio ways, and how they stand in the streets and they show everybody that they're fasting, and they do all this stuff acting as if they're so great. And they've created all these laws, 613 laws that nobody can abide by, including themselves. And he pointed out how they do, like, for example, they work on the Sabbath when they feed their animals and stuff like that. And so he's showing that they can't even they don't abide by the laws because they've made it so strict right now that they forbid people from even healing people on the Sabbath, which is something that goes against what God wanted towards the Sabbath. But my other point is that I just want to say is we see all that, and we still see some of that today with those religious people who are acting as if they're so great and so wonderful. And then sometimes they're very hypocritical towards the rest of us. And I think that can turn people off to the church, including maybe some of the people here in the chat, like Titan, who's there, and Zhang Fukusheng. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm also in agreement. I think far too often, and as much as I like you, SJ, this can sometimes apply to you as well. And I'm sure it can apply to me in certain cases. But sometimes because people agree with the conclusions that we like, we can sort of overlook the way that they conduct and behave themselves, which I think is the more important thing than whether they've got like a valid argument that proves like a fact that's really important to us, like God existing. It's probably more important that they're nice and loving to someone than it is that they, win an argument with. I don't know. I'm just thinking of some. There's a lot of sort of internet personalities in the apologetic sphere who can be more like that, and you're definitely not one of them. Like, you're always nice to everyone, but sometimes some people can be. I think they see it as like the way of standing. I think they redefine love as like, well, I'm not loving someone unless I shout at them and tell them they're going to hell and like beat them over the head with the truth of Romans 1. And it's like, well, that's just isn't what love means. Like, like love doesn't mean being horrible because you think they're going to hell. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I see. I look at somebody like Ravi Zacharias, and I have to say, I listened to him for the past 5 years until he passed away. And then suddenly it comes out that he'd been pretty much molesting all these women and just doing horrible things. And I think to myself, he lived his whole life pretending on the outside he's something he's really not. And he duped a lot of us. And And then it makes me wonder, well, who else is doing that today? Like, who are we listening to today who's doing this slimy stuff on the side?
See, I think this is where I think it comes down to the importance of developing those like intellectual virtues. So I actually think skepticism, to a degree, and this is something I was talking to Duncan Pritchard about, who's an epistemologist. Like, skepticism is actually a virtue to a degree, because it means, like, even though I wasn't identifying as a Christian at the time, I think because of my skepticism, I was able to look at the way that Ravi Zacharias conducted himself and see that he was one creepy dude, like, but not very human, the way he conducted himself, the way and respond to answers, the narcissism of the stories about his life that all seem fabricated and made up and things like that. And so in that case, I think the skepticism would have been a virtue, whereas the vice in that case was almost a gullibility, because Ravi was saying the right things that Christians wanted to hear. So I think Christians can learn from that actually, it's not so much about those conclusions. As important as Jesus is to the faith and believing God exists is to being a Christian and stuff, it's also you can also listen to the criticisms that come from the other side, authentically, and see what they've got to say about, because then I think you can leave yourself too open to people who are like that. I think actually people who are like that, sort of wolves in sheep's clothing, are really quite common in religions, because of this kind of effect, where when there's this really important fact, like someone like Jesus, they can kind of exploit that, and people are just going to be like, yeah, it's the right thing, and that's how you end up with that kind of thing happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally have to say that's, and Ravi, unfortunately, he's not the only one, I'm sure, in our history. I'm sure there's a lot of people. But I also wanted to bring up another topic that I was thinking, related again to morality, is when I had this Mr. Phil Fox on my channel, and he was talking about the experience of Native Americans and the way that some Christians, unfortunately, decided to not only do things like rewrite the Bible for the slaves and pull out certain verses that relate to slavery, that were saying, for example, you have to take care of your slaves and all those kind of things. The other thing that our first Americans did was pretending that we always say that the Christians, or we, discovered America. Christopher Columbus discovered America, and we ignore the fact that there were millions of people who were already living here, and people through the church a lot of times acted in ways to push these people out, first to the west and then further on, and then finally they pushed them all mainly into Oklahoma. And a lot of times the church was behind some of this stuff and pretending that this is like the new Israel, where we're entitled to this land because God has given it to us. And so I think that unfortunately we also have some wolves in our history like that, because I think, why wouldn't what we did, like, for example, I've been to Dahlonega, Georgia, which is beautiful. It's in the mountains. It's just the most beautiful place one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. And I see all these signs about the Trail of Tears. And a lot of Indians were pushed out of Dahlonega, forced to walk to Oklahoma over days and nights, obviously, but they were forced to walk hundreds of miles, thousands of miles to Oklahoma, and many of them died along the way. And this happened in many cases throughout the United States from different places too. And Oklahoma, I have to admit, is kind of, if you're from Oklahoma, sorry guys, but it's not really the prettiest place. Sorry. But I just want to say that unfortunately we have this awful history, but I think we need to let people need to know that. I've talked to people who say, don't, let's brush this under the rug. And I'm like, no, I think anything that is wrong with our history needs to be brought out and remembered, or else people are going to repeat that awful history.
Yeah, I think those are really, really important lessons to learn from, because, I mean, if you look at some of the rhetoric around, Trump, and I know you've not been an advocate of Trump and his stuff, which is great, but that's been a big thing for Christians recently, and also like escalating the conflict in like the conflict between like Israel and Palestine and stuff, and you can see you see these same sort of problems where more a lot of Christians are willing to accept like really not well thought through philosophy and exegesis of the Bible to just justify like horrible things because they're like, well, you know, and if you disagree, then it's just because you can't stand the truth or whatever. And I've got and it's I think the same sort of thing as went on with people using Christianity to justify those kind of horrors. And if we study those kind of things, we can perhaps raise our levels of skepticism when we see people making those kind of claims to like a healthy skepticism where we're like, well, really, you know, what are you saying there? Is there justification for this idea that, you know, like this particular war or whatever is like a new Exodus or something? Is that really true?
Yeah, good point. Welcome, Michael. Also, oh, sorry. Here, go ahead.
These were savages. These weren't like civilized people. Like some of these tribes were cannibals. They would also attack us and rape women and kill us. So, I mean,
and arguably, I mean, who are the savages, right? The ones doing that are the ones who put them in chains and make them march across continents.
I think the natives are savages.
I think one of those is actually morally worse.
It's just they had this country. They didn't really do anything with it. We built it up. So I mean, like, I don't know, man. And then
well, I can see where you're like, so I can see where your thought process is going with this. Right?
They also like their chiefs sold each other out. They sold each other out, sold their people out, like.
And that's not good. That's not good. But what
I'm just saying, like, there's this like rosy image that like these natives are these great, gentle, kind people. It's not like that. These are savage, killer cannibals.
So that makes it okay to genocide them.
Well, I
didn't say that. I'm just saying, like, let's not
what
act
are you saying,
like we're being mean to civilized, kind people. These are savage, like cannibal killers, and they got to be treated like savages sometimes.
Well, like, what does that? Yeah, and what does that mean?
Unfortunately,
genocide?
Well,
hey, genocide.
Let me just interject here real quick. So I want to make sure that people don't think that all Native Americans are, I mean, actually PMARS, what you're saying is something that's an outgrowth of what people have been teaching through history to try to justify what we did to the Native Americans. But sure, among the Native Americans, there were some bad apples, just like among white people, there are some bad apples. And among every racial group, there are some bad apples. And in some practices, in some of the tribes, yes, some of them had these cannibalistic practices, and some of them had the scalping thing and that kind of thing going on. But let's not generalize that to the entire Native American population, because I just don't think that's
am
fair.
Native American.
Oh, you are? Why are you calling yourself a?
Because I think it's important to be honest, and like I don't get this like rosy view of history people have. It's like, oh, the white man is so mean to the poor native. Well, like, give me a break. The natives were savage.
Well, we're
killers.
Condemning genocide,
so right? They should be treated like prisoners.
But does that mean genocide? Where they should be treated like prisoners? Really? That's
yes.
What you think? You think they should be treated like prisoners?
Study the history. These are not innocent people.
Well, at what point are you drawing the line? Are you saying they should be killed? They should have been killed. Is that something you're committed to?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like
slavery on plantations. Would that have been fitting? Slavery?
See, that's another thing. Like, you have this incorrect view of history, right? Like,
no, I'm asking you what.
Most slaves, I think, were treated well by their masters. In fact, when they ended slavery, some of the slaves wanted to remain on the plantation. They were quite happy. They didn't want to be free. You know, it's easy to like get brainwashed by Hollywood and have this stupid view of history, and you don't actually know history.
The European education system, which isn't as influenced by KKK members, is actually what I've been informed by about chattel slavery over here, which is part of our curriculum. Because in the UK, the abolitionist movement was really big, really influenced by Christians like William Wilberforce, right? And so it's a massive part of our education to teach people about the slave trade, the horrors of it, and just how awful it was. And so we never repeat that mistake again. And I think maybe you've been listening to, maybe the YouTube algorithm's been recommending you Jesse Lee Peterson or white supremacists, and you've been listening to them, but that isn't an accurate narrative about history, that slavery was good. Now, people have Stockholm syndrome, which is a real thing. So yeah, like people struggled when they were freed, but that doesn't make it good, right? Like it's something we should desire to ever repeat again.
Well, let me just build off that. I want to first also, let me just also say, hi, Michael X. Welcome. I don't think you've ever been in my chats before, so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I have. This is my first time. Sorry I didn't say anything at first. I was trying to not echo in the background.
Oh, no
Having
worries.
trouble with that. But yeah, thanks for letting me in.
Great, thank you. So, what's your? Do you want to express a take on either of any of this conversation? We started off talking about morality and objective morality a little bit, and kind of grew into talking about Christianity and looking at that because I'm sitting here with Nathan, who's exploring Christianity. I'm not sure what P. Mar's position is, and I'm not sure what your position is either. So maybe if you want to share that for people who are in here to start, Michael, and then we'll go over to the other guys and come back to them.
Sure. I used to be an atheist for a couple years, and maybe a few months ago, I became a Christian. I don't know whether, I did the whole. I grew up in a Christian background, so I'm not sure whether that was sincere or not. But yeah, I left Christianity for some time, and I came back a few months ago because I think certain important elements of it are well evidenced, not necessarily everything. And so I think that was sufficient for me. So I'm looking into philosophy of religion. Have been for a few months. Actually, Nathan, I do watch some of your content. So I think that it's I'm really interested in trying to learn both sides of the argument. I like trying to be objective, and making the effort to get into the scholarship of the matter, because I think there's a lot of, I don't know, at the lay level I think it can be kind of a little misleading sometimes with arguments.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to, Pimar says he's an eighth native. My husband's an eighth native too. My husband's great grandmother apparently was a full blood Georgia Creek, I think it's Creek Indian. And so we do have that coming for us. So I give my kids, that makes them 1/16th Indian or Native American. And I think that's pretty exciting, actually. I'd like to have them. But the thing is we don't unfortunately know any of we really don't have any information. I asked my husband about his great grandmother, and she had passed away when he was about 6. And his only memories of her was that she was super nice. So.
Yeah, my mom used to know the tribe. It was, but I forgot. Like I can't remember. She's passed now, so but I don't know if someone doesn't consider that native, whatever. But
if you can, it's not really how you identify, because a lot of times if even you're only an eighth, but maybe that's a big part of your life, and your parents, maybe that's a big part of their life. It kind of depends on the way you identify, as far as I know.
When I was born as a baby, I looked really native, but then when I grew, I looked more European. But I mean, I don't get sunburnt, like I have dark complexion and stuff. So
my husband doesn't either. He never gets sunburned.
I think we're all, like most people up where I live, it's like we're all like part native. So I'm just saying, like I don't hate natives. I love the idea of the freedom of the Wild West, and like I think it's romantic, and I think humans should probably live in tribes instead of this like government crap, which just seems to be like a system of Satan. Really, I think God probably wants us living in small tribes. Probably be better off, but. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, let's be realistic about like we want to paint picture as like, oh, the white man's all evil and the native's innocent, or the innocent black slave. I mean, I just don't think it's like that. Like,
I don't think that that's the story though that me and SJ are painting. I think what we're saying is that genocide is really wrong, and that's what happened, and we don't want to repeat that. And the lines of justification people used for that were poor epistemology and poor exegesis of Christianity, poor systematization.
Or
the genocide.
Let me just build off that really quickly. It's also the dehumanization of another population, and so that's something that we want to make sure we avoid, because we know within our hearts, this goes back to the beginning, that we have this conscience and that we have this morality, and we feel when we do wrongs to other people, we feel terrible about it. And so one way that humans justify that, or try to justify it, is they pretend that this other population is less than human. And so you never want to call the Native American savages for that very reason, because that's dehumanizing them, just like you wouldn't want to call Jewish people rats like they did in World War II through their propaganda. And so you just want to make sure you're as fair and humanizing as possible.
That's true. I think like the genocide is inevitable, because it's just like that's a result of civilization and technology. Like they're not going to be living in the woods while we're just building society and stuff. It's just.
So do you think the Sentinelese are going to be inevitably have to be genocided? Well, and that's just the consequence for us to build the next McDonald's.
I'd say that's different because they're isolated on an island, right? Where they don't interact with us. Like the natives interacted with us, so
Well, what about the
they
Amazonian tribes then? Do you think they should be genocided so we can have a few more McDonald's chains along the Amazon?
no.
But what's the difference? I mean, don't they have some
They're
savage
in the
practices?
Amazon. Like we live in America, they were living where we are. So just by
So if there were more
proximity,
forests in Northern America, then it would.
there
have
is
been
a lot
made
of forests. They could go live in the woods right now. There's tons of woods and shit. They have their reservations and stuff. Like,
I mean, I'm not sure.
no one's stopping them. No one's stopping them from doing
I'm
their
not
culture.
sure you fully thought through, your position here. I mean,
who's stopping the natives from going back and living like they did?
Well, it depends what you mean by living like they did. I mean, for example, there aren't like I mean, maybe there are some herds and things, but they used to rely on the migration patterns of animals, right, for a lot of their hunting and stuff like that, and that just doesn't happen anymore because of like the way that modern Americans have interrupted the ecosystem. So that's going to be a massive thing to living the way that they used to.
They interrupted the ecosystem with their stupid rain dances.
No, well, yeah, I'm sure that they also
That
interrupted, but that's not the point. The point isn't that someone
That
has
was a
interrupted the
joke.
ecosystem. No, I know, but that's not the point. The point is about the migration patterns of like medium-sized mammals, right? Which is what they relied on as a lot of their food sources. And when that's been interrupted, that means that they actually can't go back to living that way exactly as it was.
Let me just quickly say, I want to say thank you to John, who's in the chat. He put a very generous thing up there. I want to try to get Rob in here. Rob, I put the link out there for you. Get you in here. And anyway, sorry, I just, anybody else wants to come in, by the way, I put that link out there, so feel free to join us. Anyway, go ahead, proceed.
Oh, I don't know. I just ultimately, I think it comes down to a choice. Like they chose to live the way they
chose genocide.
Yeah, they made agreements with the white man. They chose to drink the fire water. You know.
Do you think what white people did was good then? Do you think the genocide was good or morally neutral? Because I want you to own this position if this is what you think, so as people can know like what your ethics are.
Well, ethics. I don't know. What are ethics?
Well, let me get in there because you said they made agreements with the white man. They did make agreements. There's actually, I looked this up, and you guys should actually really look this up. I looked it up after meeting with Mr. Phil Fox of all these treaties that we made, our historical representatives made with the Native Americans. And unfortunately, we pretty much broke every one of those treaties that we made with them. First, we make them a treaty to give them a certain portion of land. Then we go take the land away anyway. And so there's all kinds of treaties. And so I said, Phil, what do they want now? What would people want now to rectify all this stuff? And Phil said, we just would like them to go back and at least give us some of the treaties that they initially made. And so I've also got Rob and Plastic Jesus joining here. So wonderful. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, SJ.
Hi. So do you guys have anybody have a take on our conversations?
Well, only that I am a native myself and have family members that grew up in reservations and things like that. And Mr. Enmar's there should not be talking out of his ass, speaking from his grandfather's bonanza watching hip, unless he lived the experiences themselves. They were savages because they were forced to be savages, okay? We were put in a position. You can't put a hamster in a cage and tell the hamster act naturally in this spot where we put you. You're not in your natural environment. You're being moved all the way from Louisiana, all the way up in the Trail of Tears, whatever you want to call it. You want to call the breaking them apart of the people into certain places where they have nowhere to run to, and they call them sellouts when they say, okay, we have nowhere to go, we give up, please don't kill any more of our children. And say, no, we'll educate your children. But guess what? Now we're finding graves of mass buried children where they did not educate the goddamn children. They decide to execute them, okay? As they do, that's what genocide goes. It's just the mentality, if you didn't get it right, if you couldn't take them all out, then just shut your mouth. My grandmother was bought for $4,000 by my grandfather. I'm quarter German, so I have the best of both evils: Mescalero, Apache, Navajo, and German here. So it's about all the evil you can get. Sometimes I have a little appreciation for annihilation and I don't know what side that comes from. Which savage is which? You figure it out.
That is interesting. So you just say the best of, you have the German and I'm part German too. And I was just looking at all those floods in West Germany right now going on. And I was thinking to myself, I just was thinking to myself, unfortunately, Germans have this awful history.
Well, I don't know. It's kind of, if you're going to take on the world twice and almost win, I mean, that's kind of, in a way, in a weird way, very industrious people, very technological thinkers, very logical. Who's the one that started the bomb here? Who the atomic bomb that, as Americans do nicely and Europeans do nicely steal and call their own, as they do with lands and cultures.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
Yeah, cowboys' hats and boots chaps came from Mexico. Horses came from Spain. Everything is taken from sea peoples, the great northern Viking-like Northern mentality, whatever you want to call it. It's nature itself, and it's just the way animals act. And to call one animal savage over the other, when one animal is the aggressor and the attacking and going into the other animal's territory, I think of Enmar's there was, very ignorant, and he needs to learn a little more about Native American history, lore, myths, legends, and facts. Of you take away the people, you take away their food. Andrew Jackson was the one that said, "Hey, let's have a buffalo hunting contest. Let's see how high we can pile these skulls up in the sky." We're taking away their skins. That's their housing. That's their food. That's everything they use. That's everything they rely on out in the West. That you take it all away from them. What do they have left? And they call them cannibals because they have nowhere to go. You put two hamsters in a cage, you take their food away, you're going to find the next one eating the other.
They called themselves cannibals. When Christopher Columbus came here, the natives were like, "Hey, you should kill this tribe. They're cannibals. They're a bunch of crazy cannibals." And then they convinced.
Well, if you're worried, if you're going to get
this is just
tribe,
the actual history.
Okay,
I'm sorry if the truth
look
is
about
offensive
logic
to
and
you or
reality.
something.
Listen to the logic and reality here. Okay, if you're warring with another somebody,
You're
whatever,
emotional.
and you see somebody of great power that can help you, you're going to go ahead and call them whatever you can. Especially what they think is going to be the ultimate evil to take your side, so they can help you conquer these people. And that's how it works.
If I can clarify,
scratch
maybe
my back, scratch yours.
So,
that's how.
All I'm saying is no one is innocent. If we're gonna go talk about history, there's blood
Just
on
how
it.
ignorant
Everyone's
animals
guilty.
are.
There's blood on everyone's hands. So now let's not go. This person's good and this person's evil. It's because everyone is guilty. If we're gonna be honest.
Well, let me get back to, let me circle back, because I appreciate all the input here, because you guys have a variety of interesting opinions. But I want to ask Rob a question that's very related to this. And because I'm wondering about what we don't talk about in Australia are the Aboriginals. And so I'm just wondering what your take is on the native Australians. And so do you happen to know anything about them? Or, you must know something about them much more than I know, because I don't know anything about them. So.
Oh yeah, it's pretty thorny here. I don't know off the top of my head statistical studies of, say, the distribution and the welfare of Aborigines, but it's still a very sensitive subject here. We have what's called Australia Day, and it is a growing trend where the Aborigines that don't want to, marry, move on, move forward, marry within society, like actually be part of society. They, let's just say, to use a Star Wars analogy, they're like the rebels. There's always some form of, Australia is or not just Australia, by the way. You're talking practically all of Europe, because Australia is still connected to Britain, and so. By extension, the Aborigines hate, not all, but a lot of them. They dislike the West. In fact, they just dislike anyone. Not even there's a influx of a lot of Eastern Asian people coming through, especially young students, because Australia now is, as far as the economy is concerned, they're importing rather than producing. Not only Australian citizens with, say, high tech degrees and so on, and say in engineering fields, but just like, for example, right now there's a huge contention between China and Australia economically, and China's threatening Australia. They actually own the port in Darwin, which is a crazy thing, because if China were to do something insane like cause a war, they can actually invade Australia. They own that port.
They own New Zealand too.
Yeah. So, but with respect to the Aborigines, so we have Australia Day, and they call it Invasion Day. At the same time, they to sort of like to throw it in the face of regardless of who you are, whether you're a politician or if you're just a regular Aussie like myself, to throw it in your face, they take full advantage. You see, the Australian government, because of the thorny situation of this thing they call Invasion Day, we stole their land. They have more rights and benefits than anyone over here. Even if, like, for example, if an Aborigine, say, raped a girl in the city, and it happens, it's a slap on the wrist compared to like years in jail for say a white man or a black man.
Can I ask you a question? Do they actually go into the cities and rape women and get away with it, high-fiving each other on the way out? Or is this just a way of saying, hey, this sucks, we only give them one day where they can actually go out and party? Do they really take advantage of what you're saying here? Or is this just an extremism of view to retaliation to go against the ideas of giving them one day out of the year to drive a little faster than you? It sounds a little greedy to me.
To be honest, I don't understand what you're getting at there. So when I say they take full advantage, they take full advantage of the rights of the system. There's an imbalance in the system. They are pampered a bit too much purely because we are sorry about their situation.
But you're being able to be pampered at their cost, using them for your benefits, to pretty much for your own survival in the initial days of invasion, to help you get acclimation with nature, with how to survive there, and then go ahead and step on them and say, oh, now you're going to pamper us through this and this, but now that this is all over, you should be sorry in the first place. Not you yourself personally, but I mean just overall aspects of humanity. Okay, so what the heck is wrong with that? It's just like saying, it's like over here in America, we give black people a month. We give them the coldest, shortest month of the year. That's horrible. And it's the same thing. It's and it's, why do we even give them that month? We need a white month. Now we have a white month where everybody's trying to proclaim a white month is July. It's utterly.
Yeah, but you see, I will be honest, that I see where you're coming from, but that the way you presented it just then doesn't help the discussion. So for example, when you said, I
think it does. If they put you in a position where you're unable to come with a conclusion right away to answer it, maybe you need to work on. They come back with a direct answer, and I can retaliate with that. So maybe it does apply to the discussion in somewhat way. Maybe a later discussion. Maybe something.
No. Something to think about. Probably. SJ, I'll give you an example of how bad this can be. In fact, the church, specifically the Catholic Church, is more so to blame for this. I remember one time I was in the city having a few beers, and there was these two elderly Aborigine women just having a burger just there, like next to the pub, and I happened to catch their eye, and in that typical Aborigine mannerism, they have that, the way they talk, and I have nothing against them, but you can tell they're a little bit different, and broken English, high pitch, loud, but I was looking back at them, smiling, waving, and they were like motioning to me, come here. Obviously they were after because I was at the pub, hey, get me that really expensive island tea drink, or something exotic from the pub, which they can't afford, and why. And I was more so interested because I rarely get the opportunity to talk with any of them. You just see them just scattered in the city. Those who are in the city, they're just scattered, living off trash bins plus the welfare that they get, fortnightly, and that's just the way they live. Now, I'm not saying all Aborigines are like that. There are Aborigines who actually took the time and effort to actually do something with their lives and move forward. There are some in the political, area and so on. And they're the ones that are actually a good positive voice for the Aborigine community to say, look, we can actually stop, woe is me sort of attitude. We can actually be a strong voice, and that's something I like to see in that community.
Hold on, I got something quick to say about that. When we're talking off platforms here. We're talking off that damn dirty guy made it from the dirt, and he worked really hard. He really hit the books. He had the candlelight there. You're going to find those, little 1%ers of aspirations that make it out of there. But when you have everybody working on the same platform, the same opportunity for education, the same ability to have the same 3 square meals a day, because they have the same security, then you're going to have a lot more of them coming out. And this is probably like one of the most misogynistic, racist things I've heard in a long time. Actually, no, I hear it quite often. But yeah, continue.
Let me just, I appreciate all your points. I want to say Tom Rabbit is in the chat or in the group here. And I've interacted with Tom a long time ago, and Tom does a lot of videos on Darth Dawkins. So welcome, Tom. Haven't seen you ever in my chat. I've been on your channel before though, but.
Yeah. I personally hope I haven't been misogynistic or,
Well, I mean, towards women yapping and yelling, it just sound like a couple of church ladies.
I'm just,
I don't take offense.
One to the other. You know what I'm saying?
No, I mean, in fairness to Rob, he did just say high pitched. I mean, I'm not on board with absolutely everything that he said, but I also think.
Well, themism. You know how them act. The broken English. Them are less than.
Well, I think he was. I don't think. I don't think Rob had intended any like negative connotations in that sense. I think what he was describing was that there are these like differences between the groups in Australian society, and I think Rob would actually be sympathetic towards like the tragedies for them being a product of their environment to some degree, right? I think Rob thinks they've got some agency in that. But
there's actually a story to what I was getting to and the discussion I had with these 2 women. So they're motioning to me. I did get them that drink, but I knew, it wouldn't do well for them because they're just going to get more drunk. They're just going to get more animated, angry, and but what tempered that discussion was actually getting to know them. Like, hey, how old are you? And both of them were in the late 70s. Where did you grow up? And, just give me like a history. Like I spent about an hour and a half outside this pub, but with these 2 elderly women. And it really broke my heart. Basically, they were born in the 40s. And at the age of 8, which I didn't know this, by the way, because I only came to Australia in 97, but apparently from the 50s to about the 80s, Aborigines were then pushed into basically a type of labor work in a civilized sense, but in farmlands. So all the produce was then transported over into the city infrastructure because I guess you could say the white men, weren't the farmer type at the time. They were more the, building the cities and so on. Now, as far as church communities go, they were obviously and naturally interested in most of the Aborigine society because, that whole Christian message of, going out, love, that stuff. And it broke my heart to see, I guess, a rigid type of Catholic discipline which is an alien concept to an Aboriginal like way of life being introduced. Get up at this particular hour in the morning, go to sleep at this particular hour at night, do all these little chores here and there, and then on top of that, the added problem of pedophile priests. So these two particular women basically told me that at the age of 8 and 10, this one particular pastor priest guy, who was also a teacher at this Catholic school out in the farmland, he would, after school, basically sit down and have all the children say goodbye to him. And just to be PG here, sit on my lap, but not to all the students, only to particular boys and girls. And these two happened to be one of those children that basically he was doing stuff. And if they would say no, like say on another day, if he would trap them in some way and terrorize them a little bit, and if they would reject that or scream at them, him and a few others would actually lock them in the storeroom underground and just lock them for like 3 or 4 hours in the dark. Obviously they'd get beaten, the whole, spare the rod, spoil the child sort of thing that they took. And so, and on top of that, these kids were technically kidnapped from their families under the pretense that we're protecting the kids because their parents who are working on the farms can't afford to look after them medically and logistically with food. So under the pretense of like, oh look, we have the means to protect them and we have all this aid, we'll take them away. And so that added to the just the horribleness of the situation, because the parents didn't want to let go. They didn't care. It's like, okay, even if we're starving and we're not well off, they're our kids. We want to see them grow up, and we want to be a father figure and a mother figure to them. And so a lot of that generation that are now in the 50s up until the 70s now, this is why it's so thorny now, because they've grown up realizing that for like 30, 40 years plus, they've lost touch with their parents because of that. And their parents have died because they weren't looked after, or only these kids were looked after.
And
it's just really bad. It's just
coming from the streets myself. One thing I can say about that is I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, I think that's horrific. So, I believe, the thing is, it's really tragic is it's not just in Australia. That exact example has happened also in the United States and in Canada. And we're starting to see that come out, where people were, in fact, Phil Fox said his grandmother was put into a boarding school, and the parents were told, okay, you have to put your kids in these boarding schools that were in many cases run by Catholics. And you put the kids in the boarding schools, or else you're not going to get X and Y government benefits and all this other stuff. And so they were severely constrained financially if they did not put their kids in the boarding schools. And the idea from the church was that they were going to, quote, re-educate the kids and make them wear European outfits and tell them they can't speak their native languages. They had to speak the local dialect, English, or I don't know, in Quebec's case, if they had them speak French or something. But they did this in the United States, Canada, Australia. That is what we should be really angry about, because here, that's right in modern history. We're not talking about people that aren't in our own lifetimes. These are people that are in our own lifetimes.
Yeah, but to end that story, it was like a catastrophe to me. It was like a sudden. It just turned to this like tear jerk moment, where the two women, without me even mentioning anything about Jesus, they said they sort of like looking at me, noticing I'm really like long face, just hearing this. In that, the Aboriginal people have also a way of sort of making light of things in a good way. Like suddenly that, even though it might appear as depressing and horrendous and, tense in the moment, but suddenly they can like crack a joke or, everything suddenly just gets deflated very quickly. They'll say something funny, or and she basically, in that way, basically said, "But don't worry." I'm sort of paraphrasing what she said, but don't worry. I found Jesus. And then I'm looking at her going, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, um, uh, I basically that typical low of the low sort of. I was really low. I, they reach a certain age where, you see, this is the thing. We perceive these people as not having a sort of sentience, that they're not self-aware of life in general. Like on YouTube, like Nathan and myself, we go into this grand philosophical, like Plato and blah, blah, blah. Believe it or not, these people who don't even know who Plato is are also asking the same questions. And so that's what intrigued me. I was like, what do you mean, you found Jesus? Again, very simple knowledge, just simple things like John 3:16, but there's now a growing movement, and I praise God for this, but there's a growing movement within the Aboriginal community where their ancient tongue has connections to, like, the grand Abba, like the grandfather. And you might be thinking, but hang on, wouldn't they have connected Jesus to that Catholic priest, or that, that when they were growing up? The funny thing is, not really. Yes, there's prayers and hymns and Jesus in those schools, but because of the amount of cognitive dissonance and just terror psychologically that's imposed on them when they're so young, they're not aware of what they're doing. They're not absorbing that stuff, and they're just fending for themselves and trying to survive, and at the same time having to just disassociate. Like, say, like, those people who get raped, they sort of disassociate. And so imagine then, once you're coming out of that, then you're having to reconstruct who you are in the late 30s and 40s, and then from there, then they start to think about ultimate things. And so they're not really well off, because their life has been robbed from them to have a fruitful life. But there are communities within the Aboriginal community that are Christian, like genuine Christian, and they're looking out for each other in that sense. And it's just one of those. Was it providential for me to meet these two elderly women that suddenly they told me, like, don't worry, like, there's an inner peace, even though we may not have everything together, but there's that inner peace. And that really, like, how do you explain that? Like, bumping into these two people and them sharing that.
I love that story, Robin. I think that speaks to I don't believe any meetings that you have with anybody are by chance. I believe that there's a lot of orchestrating behind the scenes. I actually do believe that. Yeah. I believe we're in this spiritual battle. I mean, all this kind of stuff. But I find that really interesting, because maybe through that women, you're able to look at the Aboriginals through a different perspective, and maybe it's one that God wanted to open your eyes to. And
it's humorous in the sense that I'm thinking to myself, they have no clue the stuff I get up to with respect to that topic. Like, it's just, yeah. And so, but there's a moment where there's a humbleness in that moment where so then I start to reflect on myself, like, whoa, like, yeah, I may write all these pages of, say, commentaries and studies and YouTube stuff, but that's just knowledge. What's really valuable is wisdom and how you push through in life. And in this sense, here are two women who have not been privileged in that sense the way I've been, privileged to do what I do. But yet I will never, not like never would I tell anyone that I know what life is really like, because they've been through some stuff, and for them to then find that peace, like, yeah, like, all I could do is just praise God for that.
I'm not big on superciliousness, but when everything is subjective, I guess we all are.
Well, let me go back because I have. Let me also ask either Tom or Michael, because you guys, or actually any of you, I'll also want to contribute. But I haven't said, Tom, you haven't introduced yourself yet to people. If you're willing to do so.
SJ, I don't need an introduction. Come on, everyone knows that.
Okay. Everyone knows Tom Rabbit. He's got Rabbit with a couple extra T's on there. It looks like I can't really see that well from here, but RABITT. If you guys want to find his channel too, find Sentinel Apologetics. That's Rob's channel, and Nathan's got a channel called Digital Gnosis. That's all I know so far of the guests here today. So.
True.
How's Darth Dawkins, Tom?
Oh, the usual.
Yeah, your whole channel's kind of devoted to Darth Dawkins. Is that fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But the funny thing is that I'm not actually opposed to. I mean, I'm mostly interested in like apologists, but there really aren't any other ones. Did you know that he's probably the most prolific apologist currently in existence? I mean, like, the man is incredibly prolific, churning out.
Well, he's all over Discord, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying just on like the internet or everywhere?
Like on the internet, yeah.
He's turned 60 as well, apparently.
Yeah. I wish that there were more apologists, but there aren't.
I consider myself an apologist, or at least I named my channel Apologetics, and I know that Rob's got Apologetics on his channel. And so there's a lot of people who are Christians who might not have the kind of reputation that follows Darth. Darth is an interesting reputation that follows him.
That's true. I don't imagine Rob and SJ. I don't think you probably say as many crazy things though. So there's the entertainment value is probably not going to be the same in those cases.
Good point. He is very entertaining because when he got on my channel and then I saw it on your channel where it looked like we thought it was him showing himself, and it was really another guy.
Yeah, he was,
and that was sick. That guy passed away, and he's using that. Like,
well, I don't think there was any intention to use, like, he's like, oh, rubbing his hands together, I'm going to use a person that's passed away. I don't think it was. I think he just did a rudimentary search, but he still talks about how it was. It's like one of his best, most prized ponings of the atheist is him just using a clip and deceiving everyone. But it's just kind of funny because, I mean, he's just like, I can't believe they posted this. Look, when you say something silly, we post it. I mean, why wouldn't you think we would post that? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
At least he didn't use the guy's death to try and get patrons, like.
I mean, it's just funny that, he's an apologist. And then one of the things that he harps on just constantly is just like how he pwned the atheists with, a 3-second clip. We thought it was him.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was him too.
Good
So
one.
I want to say hi to, just Timothy said Standing for Truth is great. I just want to let you guys know, in case you don't know this, I'm having Standing for Truth on my channel this week on the 21st. So be sure to go ahead and set yourself up to watch that. So does anyone else want to talk about, now we could talk about, we've got in this group here, it looks like Plastic Jesus and Tom Rabbit, and we at least have two people I think are non-believers. I believe you wouldn't call yourself Plastic Jesus unless you're a non-believer, I assume. And so am I okay to say that?
Non-believer in Christ?
In Christianity, yeah.
Oh, I believe in Christianity. I believe Christians exist.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
I guess in Jesus as divine.
I think he believes
So
in the
serious.
Great Spirit.
can I just say one more thing about the Aborigine thing?
Sure.
Before you go on to that. Do you know the Australian song "Waltzing Matilda"?
I do. I'm sorry.
Okay,
No, I don't.
I've heard of it.
so "Waltzing Matilda, Waltzing Matilda." So it's actually not a fun song, even though it's presented as
Yeah, there's a ghost
fun
in
song.
it. Dude dives in and kills himself over his convictions of keeping his freaking goats, right, or lambs or something like that.
Yeah, but
Once there
it's
was
actually
something jump buck,
yeah.
tucker bag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit worse than that. It's again it's this underlying theme of a colonial thing going on. So the song goes, "Once a jolly swagman camped by Billabong." Billabong is a river. "Under the shade of a coolabah tree." And by the way, all these terms are Aboriginal terms like swagman, Billabong, coolabah. "And he sang as he watched and waited till his billy boiled." That's a goat. Or it could be a sheep as well.
Hey,
"You'll
very
come
close from memory.
You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me." So it's waltzing Matilda. So he's basically saying, so as he waited till his billy boiled, he's basically subjugating. He's like the predator, but not in a bad way. He's needing food. So he's "You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me." So down came a jumbuck to drink at that billabong. Up jumped the swagging and grabbed him with glee. And he sang as he stowed that jumbuck in his tucker bag, "You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me." So it's like, oh, here's another one. Off you go into my bag. And then waltzing Matilda. And so then down came the squatter mounted on his thoroughbred. So the squatter is that white guy on his horse with a gun. Up came the troopers, 1, 2, 3. "Who's that jolly jumbuck you've got in your tucker bag? You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me." So it's so here's this colonial like policeman, or maybe the guy who owns a farm, interrogating this guy because he's stolen one of his sheep possibly. And then up cut the swagging and jumped into the billabong. "You'll never catch me alive," said he, "and his ghost may be heard if you pass by that billabong. Who will come a waltzing Matilda with me?" So to avoid arrest and jail and possibly even death by the hands of that white guy on the horse and the police, he commits suicide. And then basically, because you have an Aboriginal myth and lore in their religion, spirits roam, territorial spirits, like if you die in that area, that you basically roam that area around. So it's a little subtle hint of a combination of he's not going to then basically become like a slave to this totalitarian thing going on in that local sense. So he escapes that just in time, drowns, and now he's a free spirit, but at the same time haunting that place. And so if you were to pass that by Billabong, the spirit may echo, who will join me in this in this afterlife moment. And then then it repeats the chorus. So notice that's like Andre Lou, the famous that musician guy, classical musician with the what's it called, like Andre Lou's like a John Williams, and he started playing this one time in Australia, and the whole crowd was just singing it. All the children were singing it. It's sort of like a children's song as well, but when you actually read the lyrics, it's not. It's a very dark song. So yeah,
we have quite a similar song with "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" that they always sing at the rugby matches for England as well, which is about like slavery song and stuff.
I kind of know that song, but I don't know any of the lyrics. I just know the "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," that particular lyric and how that's sung, but I don't know what the rest of the song says.
I
So
only
I'll
know
have to
coming
listen to
forth
that.
to carry me home. Yeah, I don't know.
I
I'm gonna
looked
listen to
over
both of you.
Jordan, and what did I see? Coming forth to carry me home. A band of angels, and they're coming after me. Coming. There's another part in there about if I get there first, I'll pull you through, and if you get there first, tell my friends I'm coming too.
Huh.
It's a fun little song, yeah.
It's interesting looking at some of our folklore and our songs in different ways now. So I appreciate that. So Randolph Richardson, he said he's going to join in 5 minutes. Randolph said he's the president of this Canadian atheist group, and that the atheists are in existence. Atheism is just like saying atheism is dead. Atheism is not dead, because Randolph Richardson's here to tell us it's not dead.
I was going to be silly. I won't.
No, that was my play. I was trying to, and no, I know somebody's going to say that that's clickbait, but I made that title because it's a play on God's dead from Nietzsche. So,
well, I was going to say you could it wouldn't be particularly nice, but you could sort of say, oh, he's got like this atheist club, but it'd be, and just keep calling it a club and see how annoyed he gets. But that's kind of like, there's the darker side of my personality and terrible sense of humor coming out.
well, there's another, if I would have said, if I would have had on my title, instead of "Is Atheism Dead?" if I said, "Is Atheism a Religion?" I would definitely.
I think that's a good.
You would have gotten people riled up for that.
You'd have got Aaron Ra. I think that's a really good question though as well. I find it so funny. I mean, Aaron Ra's got something going on with his definitions, but I find some of the things he says around like defining religion so bizarre. When he says like, like I define religion as belief in like things that I deem as false or whatever, and then he's like, well, the religious people, they're all wrong, but I would die for atheism, but I wouldn't say I'm dying for a belief. I'd be dying for truth. And it's like, yeah, but like that's also the same thing that like the jihadis would say. He's got no perspective, not learned any lessons, I don't think, from deconverting and so forth.
Would it be simple to say a simple question as, do atheists pray?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, not all religions pray, right? I mean, do Buddhists pray?
They chant.
That's the thing with
meditate, they contemplate, but praying is different. Praying is hoping, wishing something from a greater being to give you something out of nowhere, nothing, just because you asked for it. That's prayer.
But
faith, hope,
are you saying
all that other stuff could be set to wayside? Prayer is prayer.
Are you saying that is what sets apart a religion?
If atheist prays, then he's not an atheist.
Oh yeah, I think that's not the point. Is like, I think a better way of defining religion, rather than a commitment to like supernatural entities.
Okay, well, let's put it this way. I'll pray that I'm putting him in a position where I'm going to try, offend anybody like that. We're going to pray this child gets cured of cancer, or are we going to hope that this child gets cured of cancer? There's a difference between that. You're asking for
I'm not sure there is.
You're asking for a greater goodness, a deity, something supernatural to save that child because of an asking, because of a begging, of a pleading. That's what prayer is. Other than that, it's just hope, or that type of deal. So atheism is not a religion, and
it's unclear. It's so confused what you. It likes to be. Hang on, you're confused. You're confused, right? So
because you're going into the grays. You're confusing yourself.
No,
you're going
I'm
to
not.
The gray areas and try to knock things down too far. That's what.
No, you don't know what you've just said. Okay, so are you saying that prayer is a necessary condition for something to be a religion?
Yes.
Okay. Do Buddhists pray?
Do they?
No. And is Buddhism a religion? Yes. It can't be a necessary condition, because necessary condition. So this is where you need to think. The definition
of religion, then the definition of religion itself is what you're going after here. And if religion is just an institution, then a college is religion, everything's religion. Elementary schools are religion. Everything's an institution.
Right.
Everything's religion. So now we're going from heaven to ground.
If I could get a word in edgeways, right? I would be willing to accept that. Yes, I would accept that 100%.
Thank you.
So you've not like reductio ad absurdum to me, because I'm just like, yeah,
I shouldn't have to. We should be on the level of thinking here where you should already get them, understand. You like to break things down. That's that's the attitude of certain people do, because they like to seem, they have something over somebody because of a certain type of nomenclature or nuance
but
of
I don't care about the
literature,
language.
linguistics. We're getting down to the language.
It's the logic. Your logic is confused. Like, you don't know what you're saying, and I'm trying to clarify, but then you keep interrupting me when I try and help you.
Don't. Yeah, that,
Well,
that word help from the white
get,
man does not come across as help. You
well,
say,
it doesn't. My race doesn't matter. Don't. You're racist, right?
It does when it comes from your guys' point of view.
No,
what
my race is irrelevant to my race.
Wait,
is irrelevant to my points. You are a racist.
I meant mentality. Oh,
I don't have a white mentality.
Everybody's a racist.
To
deny you're a racist is just you're denying
to deny I'm a
nature.
racist. No, I'm not a
you're
racist.
You're denying human nature.
No, well, maybe you're a racist because you think I have white thoughts. You think somehow the melanin in my skin dictates the content of my thoughts. That's the racist idea. That's abhorrent.
Raising does.
Hey, don't forget the melanin is like the metachlorians, right? That's why you're. I'm just joking.
Well, from what I understand, like, religion is a bit of a nebulous term. Like, there's no real agreed upon definition of it. Like in sociology, I think they kind of debate what a religion is.
I'm looking up on
exactly. So we're going off what we know.
I don't understand classic Jesus's.
Because
I don't understand classic Jesus gripe in this whole, like, even when I was explaining things, you're presuming a lot.
I guess I'm just based in reality rather than,
Well, I mean, I'm just someone who disagrees with you, doesn't think they have false beliefs, right? They're not going to go, oh yeah, well, I'm just based on lies. Like, that's the dumbest thing to say. Well, I'm just speaking the truth. Like, everyone thinks their opinion is true. That's what
there's two rules. There's two rules that to everything. Okay, number one, everything's subjective, and number two, you're wrong.
But that's what no. Yeah, but this is so silly, right? So what you're saying, what you're saying is, firstly, you're seeing everything through this heuristic of race, right? And it seems like you're against racism, but it seems like the actual heuristic of the morality you've adopted has taken on board some of the ideas that underpin things like phrenology and racism, right? These are like, you've not learned the lesson of racism, which is not to judge people by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Instead, you're trying to apply that back and go, no, Whitey, you've got the wrong idea.
How does it feel? How does it feel?
Yeah, like, bad, because I'm against racism. I think it's terrible, and I think you should learn the lesson from the evils of the past.
Attacking you from the color of your skin. How did it feel? You defended yourself, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
Thank you.
Which is why I'm against black racism as well. Like, how have you not learned the lesson? How can you say you're against racism?
I don't know how we got here, but I'm against it.
Yeah, but the problem is, right, saying you're against racism and then not learning the lesson, right? And the lesson is that you don't judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of the character. Instead, you're going, actually, the color of your skin is pertinent to the content of your character. And I'm saying it isn't. Learn the lesson from racism. Don't just repeat the problem, but the other way around.
But when the little things that come across, I guess it would say in certain language, certain speak, I guess it's mainly in the upbringing. I guess certain people say things without
right. Do you know anything about my upbringing?
No, not you necessarily. I'm just saying pretty much maybe a little bit of Rob on the upside more of that, but PNMAR is on the very far side of this one.
Well, it seems like it was when I said necessary condition and you didn't know what it was. That was when you got annoyed at my race. You went for my race then.
Subconsciously, just by certain words or a little a smirk or smile, or still better than.
No, but you're projecting. You're reading this.
It offends the person.
Yeah, it's
micro
way.
But it's you
the same way I offend you right now. That's all I'm saying.
Look,
okay. Let me
projecting this onto people. It's not
okay. Let me just stop this for a second, because I think I started this by asking about a religion and atheism. Let me just clarify really quickly. Religion is a quote, a belief and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods, or a particular system of faith and worship, or the pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. And so the third definition is sort of related to what the U.S. government considers is a religion, because the U.S. government protects explicitly in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, explicitly protects atheists and agnostics from religious discrimination, and in Title VII, and against any sort of employment discrimination, just to point that out. So if you look at it as a religion in one way, then you get rights through the government, which I think is a pretty good deal.
something about religion, if I may, just to get off the subject of this kind of thing. It was also about what you said earlier, Rob, about Catholicism. I think Catholicism is a very well tool to get people, especially like indigenous or tribal people, because they're very superstitious, and Catholicism plays off of superstitions to the T. And of course, with everything that's in there to do anything, you're going to find, the scum of the earth. You call them, or I would also call them, pedophiles and people of that such.
Again, when I mention that, I'm just mentioning the story. I'm just regurgitating the story she shared, and I'm not then blanketing all Catholics under the same umbrella and blah 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 blah. It's just a matter of fact that.
But I mean, in human nature, superstitions run deep, very deep, and
yeah. But I see the logic in the reason why even the story even makes sense to begin with, because guess what? The Catholic Church had the means to do what they could do. They had the financial means to have a say in the political sphere, to then, under that so-called religious code act thing in a certain, in writing, in some declarative act, that they can, tax-free, they can do what they wanted to do and further their cause and all that stuff. And then, so I will go the benefit of the doubt and say they're wanting to do something good. But you still have the wolves in sheep's clothing that cause a little bit of friction here and there, and in their case, that's an example of a particular example. So
it seems to me a problem of human nature. It doesn't matter the ideology or your race. Power corrupts, and like when people get power, they start oppressing other people. They could oppress them based on income level or hair color or whatever. It doesn't matter. It seems to me just human nature thing. So
yeah, opportunistic animals. That's what
SJ, I'm gonna head out. God bless you, and nice seeing you, Nathan, and the rest of you. Take care.
See ya.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
I want to say hi to Veckel also, who's in the chat. Veckel's a good friend of mine going way back. And Veckel, if the things that you're saying with PMARS, it sounds like you have some repenting to do. I just want to say, if you have some of the things that you said today with respect to Native Americans, if those are also extended to to Black people, I think that you should come clean with that and maybe apologize to Veckel and to anyone else that might be offended righteously in this particular case. So I just want to point that out.
I had to rebuke Veckel because I didn't appreciate the cut of his jib. He's being kind of uppity,
Well, did we just lose? I know we lost Rob. Did somebody else just drop out? I don't know.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Tom, did you want to comment?
I mean,
Veckel's a nice guy. That's all I'll say. Is I really like Veckel a lot. So.
Oh yeah, I really like Veckel
he's a
too.
good Christian.
He's a very.
He treated me really bad, so I told him off.
He's always in my comments. I really appreciate him always. Raising me in the algorithm. So Veckel, thank you very much for your support of the channel. But as far as the race stuff, I mean, I'll just be, I don't know how else to say it. I don't find discussions about race interesting at all. I don't find them. I mean, I'm not into the racism thing. I think the discussions about it are silly. I think people who go into it, it's just a bunch of silliness. And it's not like I'm clutching pearls or anything. I am just not someone who finds that worthy really of even discussing anymore. It's a funny story because when I think when I first was in like G+ and stuff, and there was this sort of resurgence online of like neo-Nazis or something like that, and it was very weird. I'd never really come across these people before. And to be honest, I was really actually surprised. I was so surprised. I was like, wait a minute, there's still like racists that exist. And after that, it was just it just all came out of the woodwork. It's just kind of sort of this resurgence thing. But yeah, I don't particularly like discussions about it myself.
Google Plus was an interesting environment.
Let me say hi to thank you, Tom, for that. I don't like racists and racism either. And unfortunately, I do see that there are definitely some racists out there. I know that if someone tried to pretend we don't have racists anymore, they're wrong. I mean, I've heard them just a couple days ago. I was listening to my kid's basketball game, and I heard somebody say something that I considered quite racist. And I thought to myself, wow, 2021, and this person is a parent of one of the kids.
I speak out publicly against people who do that.
So yeah,
I know.
I feel bad for all the racists because it's like everyone's hating racists, and it's like no one wants to give the racist a chance. So I would like to stand with the racist, because I think that's what Jesus would do.
Who said that? Pima.
It's just like we're all persecuting racists, so like racists are humans too. So I will stand with them and bear that
It
cross.
doesn't make it a good moral act, does it?
When
the fact that they're a minority.
It's wrong to
think
persecute
against the
people.
racists.
Do you think that?
Against
Do you
their
think
idea.
do you think that pedophiles are humans too?
Yes.
Now,
I think that's
No,
a bad question, because the question isn't, are they human? No one's saying that they're not human and they should not have human rights or anything. What we're saying is that their immoral actions should be treated as such, and the communities that we form should ostracize that kind of behavior, penalize it, and try and reform people who have developed those ideas for whatever reasons, so they have more good ideas where they can treat people based on the content.
You mean like
That's a good approach.
in Salem when they thought it was immoral to
that question.
practice witchcraft, so then they started burning witches. Like we're burning.
That question was
racists.
that question was directed to you when you said, "I stand with the racists; they're humans too." Right? It seems to be you saying that the justification for standing with racists is because they're humans too. We're gonna be able to look at any group of people, any number of them that are just completely detestable in some way. They're all going to be humans too, right? So that's obviously not your justification while you're saying you're standing with the racists, because they're humans too, right?
Yeah,
Well,
so
we're
the
all-
people
we're
he's
all
opposing,
standing.
they're humans.
All demons are humans, but not all humans are demons.
What?
When
Demons
it says
are
in the
humans?
Bible that some will leave my faith, some will stay with the wicked, some will stay with the demons. Not all, sorry, all demons are humans, but not all humans are demons. That's something to think about.
Demons are humans?
This is
Yeah, I have to disagree with him, but I have a different view of that. I have a different view of what the world is comprised of. So
Jesus hung out with the people that everyone persecuted and hated in the Bible, like the tax collector would be like the racist of today.
Well, yeah, he hung out with them, right? But he wasn't. He also wasn't like, you know what I love? I just love it when you guys sin. Like, I tell you what, actually, if anything, just become even worse. That's what I want to do, and I'm just gonna love. I love hanging out with people. And actually, why don't we just go and murder some people while we're at it? And that's not the reason people find Jesus a morally compelling
Okay,
character.
you first.
But you shouldn't hate them.
Well, I think
so.
I think
Veckel wants me
hate
to
the
ask you a
racism-
question. Wait. So Veckel wants me to ask Pmars, do you think Jesus is transgender, Pmars?
I do not, but I made a joke about it. Because there's Galatians 3:28 where it says there's no male or female, we're all one in Christ. So I made a joke.
Is being transgender considered evil itself?
Evil?
I don't think so. I can say no, not at all. From my point of view.
Okay. Because then that would kind of break up the previous statement of what evil is compared to if transgender was compared to evil as it was before.
From my point of view, it's just morally irrelevant. I mean, it could become morally relevant if someone used it as a justification for a master race of trans people or a subhuman race of trans people or something, and those would be bad views in my opinion. But in and of itself, someone isn't better or worse for being trans. That's just something that they are.
I think you
Right.
bring up there's a couple of things that I want to say. So anyway, I probably want to try to move this conversation away from discrimination or anything that could be perceived as discrimination from anybody. So let's sort of shift away if we could. I have a thing that I think that I wanted to a little bit talk about too today that has to do with Genesis 1:27. We're all made in the image of God, and also the idea that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Because somebody said yesterday this idea of fearfully. What do you mean fearfully? Why would it say we're fearfully and wonderfully made? And I think that that's kind of an interesting thing. Is the Christians in here would say this idea of the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom. And so Rob had talked a little bit about wisdom and knowledge and how they are different. You can be very knowledgeable and also very low levels of wisdom, and vice versa. And so I just thought that was something to add to the conversation a little bit.
You know, one thing that gets me about the wisdom part is it's like a fear of wisdom. You say yourself like a fear of wisdom, where like Native American, I'm Apache, it's the giving of wisdom from the great eagle sky gods that were able to destroy the beast with their great rocks, you know, obviously probably bombs or something, getting that later. But it was wisdom that was handed down, was something that was to be appreciated of and to be taken care of and to be held sacred and to be shared among his people and not to be used in a foul or wicked way. Yeah.
I want to agree, Plastic Jesus. I don't think that fear of wisdom is a good thing at all. It's the idea of fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So there's the fear of God, meaning it's sort of saying respect for God is important in that context.
Like the knowledge of God, to acquire the knowledge of God, is fear itself?
Because we'll never have God's knowledge.
If God is self, right, is God evil? Is one question. No. Okay. Is God pure good?
Yes.
Then God cannot perpetuate himself in a creation. He would have to create evil. He can't create himself. He would have to create evil.
Well, Isaiah tells us God has created evil.
Right. So we're kind of like, I guess, maybe out of evil will come goodness. So again, not all demons are human, but not humans are demons.
I definitely think there are some demons in humans. I'll definitely say that, and that goes to the New Testament.
Exactly, I mean, and some are able to see out this evil to some goodness, and some never will. You know, it's like
Well, it's like what C.S. Lewis says in The Corruption of Goodness, and so in fact, that was one of the things I was going to talk just kind of briefly, just to say what he says. It's really, really super interesting. He says, but the moment you say that so he talks about the two powers, some law or standard or rule of good, which one of the powers conforms to and the other fails to conform to. So it's the idea of God and Satan being a corruption of God. Like evil falling from goodness.
I mean, even if it says that, you know, Lucifer himself is a creation of God himself.
He is.
Only being one, yeah. So evil is already there.
Well, I kind of think it's like an allegory for like the fall of man and the evil in human nature. So like I think we're all like because of like Adam and Eve in the garden, the world was corrupted, so we're born into a world that's corrupted. So we have to be like born again through the Spirit, and the power of love. God's love will transform us. That's how. So I kind of think like we're all wicked. So I don't think we should be so like, you know.
I disagree with that.
If someone's like a bad person, you shouldn't hate on them because it's like you're a bad person too. You know, like that's kind of how I see it.
I just see called Legion in here. Did somebody mention demons? Because there's this one part in the Bible where Jesus casts this legion of demons out of this man, and they run into a pile of pigs and fly into the ocean or the sea or whatever. So.
I heard the pork prices were tripled for years.
Oh man.
So P. Mars, I disagree with that view. I don't think everybody's wicked. I think it varies from person to person, and I guess I take a more optimistic view than you.
Actually,
your poop don't stink.
No, wait. I want to ask Randolph. Richard said something kind of related to this, but Randolph said something very.
It's
hi.
nice to talk with you. It's our first time chatting ever, I think.
Yeah, I want to say as far as Randolph, because Randolph, I made a little video of what you did with your interview with John Maddox, that because I thought it
saw
was
it.
really interesting. So I wanted to see if you could expand on that, because you said something like if God would, you had a way that God could let you understand him, and it was to make you also God, I think is what you said. So
Yeah,
I wanted to see if you want to expand on that.
I reshared your video on Twitter, by the way. So
Oh, thank you.
that little video clip, I added it to my reviews playlist on YouTube. So thank you for reviewing it. What I was saying there was John Maddox in that debate on Modern Day Debate. He was asking me what it would take to prove to me that the God of Christianity is real. Well, a God was real, and then he agreed that we could talk about the God of Christianity, which made sense since he's a Christian. And so I said, well, there's a number of different characteristics for the Christian God. There's omnipresence. There's he's omnichronological. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. So all these different omnis, these all powerful, all knowing, were the two that I focused on. And I said, look, if what it would take to prove to me, an example would be that this God grants me those two powers, omniscience and omnipotence, for a period of about a fortnight, and then I could use those powers to validate, to verify that these things are real, and to perhaps do a few other things. I have a bit of an agenda. I want to explore the far reaches of the cosmos and bring a few people with me who'd like to record what's going on and run some experiments as well. And then, so he misunderstood that as me wanting to be God. And if I was wanting to be God, then I would want all of his characteristics. I only wanted those two. Those would be sufficient for me. Definitely. So that was an example that I gave. And I remember your reaction. You thought it was really funny as well.
I do think that's funny because only God is omniscient and omnipotent. And so I don't even know what to say. I just found that very, very interesting. So if you say that you would want to be omniscient, or you would want to have some of the characteristics that God has, and then you said you have an agenda, one is traveling across the universe, what other agenda would you have? Do you have critiques of what God has done in the universe that you would be addressing with this omniscience and omnipotence?
I think for this, it would just be to prove it. I would just be interested in testing out those powers, not on our galaxy, but just somewhere else, just to kind of see how it works and see if I could actually create a whole galaxy and then destroy it, and those sorts of things. I wouldn't want to really mess around with anything else. And the reason I would want both omniscience and omnipotence is because omnipotence would be this all-powerful ability to do anything, to create anything, to destroy anything. And omniscience would be necessary to make sure that I knew how not to misuse that power. So, I guess the only thing I would probably do that would deviate from this experimentation would be to satisfy some of my curiosity about what else is out in the universe and the cosmos and how large it is, and if there's multiple universes and things like that. So...
Interesting. So what characteristics, now my belief system says that God is also all loving and all forgiving and all just, fully just. And so one of the reasons that Jesus died on the cross was because he was uniquely capable of reconciling God's perfect mercy and perfect justice by dying for us, taking on our sins, and God being able to forgive for the sins based on that. And so are you willing to take on all loving, all merciful, all just as well?
Well, I'm only asking for those other two. It's I'm really, I don't see a need for those others, but to prove that he exists, it's those two that I outlined that would be needed. Now, as far as Jesus dying on the cross to forgive everybody else's sins, that is a discussion that's probably for another video, because I don't think it's a small topic. But in summary, I do consider that, which is, it's called vicarious redemption, and that to me is unethical, because to me, I think it's the victims of a heinous act or a crime who are, to me, the ones who should be giving forgiveness for some bad action that occurred to them, not some third party giving forgiveness. So I do think that in a way that interferes with being all loving and all caring.
See, I believe that we have light within us. I read John 1 and look at that kind of thing, but we've got God's light within us. And so essentially we are part of God's system. God is within us as the Holy Spirit. And so through that, I believe that when you say he's a third party, I don't buy that argument, because I believe that, again, we're part of the light.
Okay. Yeah, because of the omnipresence, I guess.
That's true. Yeah, that's
and
part
light
of it.
within us is, by the way, quite a beautiful sentiment, I think. So.
Yeah, no, interesting. No, so your opinion is very interesting. Now, let me say this. If, a hypothetical situation, if suddenly Jesus appeared to you, but didn't give you the omniscience and omnipotence, if he appeared in front of you today, he just showed up and he performed a few miracles and proved in no uncertain terms that he is Jesus the Lord, what would you do?
Well, if it was enough to prove to me, then I guess I would be convinced. But if without that extra stipulation, to me, I would be questioning my own sanity, wondering if I'm imagining something or if perhaps I'm being tricked somehow.
So what if you were convinced and you realized you weren't being tricked, and Jesus actually, what if he wrote in the sky in bold letters, Jesus is Lord, and all of the stars all aligned in such a way that it says Jesus is Lord right in the sky, and everybody else confirms, say you have a wife, I don't know if you have a wife and you have kids, all these other people confirmed, yes, Randolph, this is what we're seeing. And then the whole planet actually also took a film of it, and we were seeing it on all the news stations, all through the globe. Everyone's confirming that this is all written in the sky. Then what do you do?
Well, that would be very convincing. And I guess if I was convinced, then yeah, I'd become a believer.
Okay, that's fair. See, I think that particular question is a good question to ask. So you become a believer, but okay, that's actually, because a lot of people say that they would believe that he existed, but they wouldn't want to worship him. Is that the position you'd be in at that point?
Well, because I have to note, though, it's important to note that you did put the condition there that I was convinced by what was going on. So in that case, if I was convinced, then yes, I'd become a believer. Now, as far as worshiping him, to me, one of the ideas I promote is that people should be their own leaders instead of following somebody or worshiping somebody. So I don't imagine that this would change for me. So I would probably, very likely, still not be worshiping him. I do take issue with some of the things that have happened according to the Bible, because there's some really horrible things in our history. If the Bible is a representation of our history, such as God ordering Abraham to kill his own son, or flooding the entire planet and killing people by drowning. When I was a kid, I was thrown into a swimming pool by a drunk guy who yelled, "I'm going to learn you how to swim," and I drowned. I blacked out before or when I hit the bottom. So I know
it's horrible.
Yeah, I know what it's like to drown. It's a terrible feeling, and it's terrible when you wake up and you're coughing out chlorine-filled water. But anyway, so I have a pretty good idea of what it feels like to drown. So this story of almost every life on the planet being drowned to death, to me, is really, really awful. And so I would want to take some issues with this God directly if I could, and have a conversation about this stuff. But I don't know, given what I understand of the character, I don't know if he would listen, or if it would make any difference, or it would be would serve any usefulness. So, because I get the impression that he's got, from what a lot of Christians tell me, is that he has a specific plan in mind and doesn't really deviate from it.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong.
There are different Christian perspectives on the way that the world is organized, and whether or not people believe in determinism or if they believe in other kinds of Christianity. There's a bunch of varieties of Christianity. And some people say, therefore, that means that Jesus isn't Lord, because there's a bunch of varieties of Christianity. And I just think that that's sort of a non sequitur.
When something is broken, is it really whole?
When something is
It's
broken, is it
not-
really
it's not-
whole?
If it's broken by
Whole
design,
broken thing. Whole
If
The
it's
broken.
religion
broken by
itself, I
design.
mean, Christianity, there's so many different sects and derivatives of Christianity. They fight amongst each other. It's breaking up. It's broken.
I think a
that's-
broken
But that standard science is broken.
I think a broken thing can be
Science too,
whole
yes.
if it's broken by design.
Well, it's like one of those things. If you have a crack in your tile in your floor in your bathroom, does that mean that the house has no builder?
Well, it's not
Well,
it's
going
not
from the whole
exactly
bathroom
like that.
floor to the whole house. It's a little different.
It's not really like any of those things. The question you have to ask is, what are the actual predictions that Christians themselves would commit themselves to, right? And Christians would commit themselves to that after some eschatological period, then the church would be found unblemished, whatever that means, right? But they're not committed to the belief that before that period, the church is unblemished. And now you could make an argument that well, you believe that if a God exists, then his church would have to be unblemished, but then you wouldn't be arguing from the same set of premises as the Christians, so then you're just talking past each other.
Yeah, I think if we go back, if we want to really know the way that Jesus
Generational.
sort of organized us to be worshiping, a lot of people think that, and in fact, even Phil Fox and the person that he referred to, Charles, I'm forgetting his first name. I can't believe my memory sometimes. But one of the things he talked about in the first few hundred years of Christianity, we didn't have these formal, gigantic churches. Christians didn't have the legal rights to be worshiping. They were oftentimes rounded up and persecuted quite heavily. They were torched. They were crucified. They were burned. All kinds of terrible things happened to them. But then we had Constantine legalize Christianity in 313 when he said he had a vision of a cross. And we had people like Origen really touting Constantine. And then suddenly we went from around 5 to 6 million followers to about 50 million followers in that next century. And then we had some things come into the church that were rather creepy in some ways. So some of the stuff that we have in our history is not very good. Does that mean that that's ordained by Jesus? No, that's not. But it does mean that we're unfortunately fallen people. We have a heritage of making mistakes and not living up to the standard to which we aspire. And so we should be able to fairly look back at history and see that kind of stuff and say, maybe that's not how God wanted things to be. And so it doesn't mean does he want us to be carrying it out by living by the sword as they did? Because Jesus said, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. And so a lot of the stuff that we have in history is pretty ugly.
Some of the early Christians refused to fight in the Roman army because they thought Jesus was a pacifist,
and he was.
I agree too, or nonviolent. And when the guard injured Peter injured the guard, Jesus admonished Peter and healed the guard. And Jesus could have resisted against the Roman Empire violently, but he chose to resist them with love. And so I think as Christians, we are not supposed to fight in the war. And these early Christians actually got beheaded because they refused to fight in the army. And I think that is an admirable trait of the early Christians, personally.
I agree with you.
It interests me the point that you're saying that Jesus was not violent. Because my understanding is that with Jesus being introduced, he introduced hell, the concept of hell to people, to the world, where people are being tortured violently in an afterlife. So that comes across as somewhat contradictory to me, but maybe I'm not understanding the reason for this.
Yeah, I think that's the whole idea. There's also Christian disagreement on that. There's some people who are universalists who don't believe that there's any sort of existence of hell, but I don't think that's biblically supported.
No, that's not right, SJ. That's the biggest misunderstanding of the universalist position, because
it varies depending on the universalist, which universalist you're talking to, because there's a wide variety of types of universalists.
The universalist people who are non-universalists talk about always never believes in a hell, right? And so it's really easy to say, well, there's this talk of this place in the Bible, so that position is just clearly non-biblical and wrong. But the actual universalist position is to do with, it's actually more consistent with this externalist account of the good, which is logically identical to God, and it's this view of final causation, right? So everything is actually oriented towards the good as its final cause, union with with God, and then the idea being that hell is basically actually this reforming and refining place. So the discussion of the fires of hell through which things cast and pass through is actually about purifying. It's not just this arbitrary, like random 17th century like judge who's like, well, infinite crimes, I've got to do justice, even though my moral sensibilities tell me that this is horrible. It's actually what justice is, and so I've got to go with it, and you're going to be tortured forever. It's actually to do with the fact that people just have flaws, and so being given over to those flaws in some kind of way. Like, I'm not saying I actually have any idea what any of that kind of language would actually mean on this view, but somehow there's a refining and purification period that does away with that, so as there can be union with the good.
It does seem like that's reflected in actual reality, because like a lot of people who go through trials in life or a hard, difficult time in life, that's a lot of times when they find God.
Oh, calling your job don't make it right, boss.
Well, let me. Okay, so I do appreciate the clarification. I'm not a universalist. I did kind of fall for some of those ideas for a while because I was reading a lot of Dr. Wayne Dyer's stuff, and he I would say is a universalist. And so, but there's a lot of different types of universalism out there. I just want to point that out because I have followed the Wayne Dyer version of it. I might not follow the Alyssa Childers version of it, or whatever other version there is, John Depew or Laura Robinson, or all of the other people who are probably somewhere in that spectrum of universalism.
Gregory Nisser and Origen, I would recommend. I would say, let's read the earliest Christians and the Bible as well. I mean, like, have you never been in a Bible study and all those times when it says God desires all can be saved, and it's like, well, it's kind of awkward, right?
Well, Origen was kind of early, but Origen was around the time of Constantine, so he wasn't the earliest Christian. And so, yeah, he did have those views.
But I'm talking about people who the first people who actually did systematic theology, right? So there's plenty of early Christians, but in terms of like the geniuses who like synthesized Christianity early in those first 400 years, a good portion of them, not all of them, but a good portion of them were universalists. It's not until later that, and this is why it's so important again to study Christian history, because like modern Protestants for some reason have got this idea of like from like an episode of The Simpsons about what hell is and what the Bible's talking about, and it is ridiculous, and people generally are better off as atheists, I think, than believing in that. Whereas if you actually get into the Hellenistic philosophy that influenced the Bible, and you start reading about, and you go, oh, hang on, in Plato's Phaedo, there's this place called you actually start understanding the influences and the philosophy that actually lies behind what's going on there. And this notion of final causation and the good as a semantically external thing that's logically identical with God, it's far more consistent than the Protestant story overall. And it's not evil.
When Rome conquered Judea, then that's when they got like the Hellenistic Jews, or the Greek culture started influencing.
When Alexander took over the world, that's when they got the Greek culture.
So just to put a history on some of this, so we know Alexander did his conquering around 332 BC, and Jesus came about, from my estimation, somewhere around 2 BC, and lived till about 33, and then in 70 the Romans did conquer Jerusalem and basically leveled it, and leveled the synagogue, leveled all of the stuff that they had done, and the Jews dispersed all over. And so that's just a little early history, that just to put a context. So the interesting thing that follows from that is how this was all predicted in the book of Daniel, as far as a lot of the things that you see right there and which kingdoms would come into play.
I know I'm coming at it and maybe like I'm a bit frustrated because I've had to like argue against white supremacy and against racism, so I'm a bit like head up. But it's like I think this story is just not like, this is why people who in like the modern world, and they hear this sort of stuff and they're like, what? I just read like a basic undergrad textbook on what the Bible has to say, and this is just not true. And then it's like, so then the choices that are on the table, right, are to be intellectually dishonest with themselves and become a Christian out of fear of this hell, or to like just oppose Christianity because you get like this tribal division. Whereas I think if people would actually just like read the things for what they are, like read what the best biblical scholars have to say about it, and then try synthesizing it with your conscience of what what the good actually is, with what the best of philosophy could actually take. You synthesize it all together, and you can make it into something that is consistent and more humble.
No, I think, but I see. I would, Nathan. Do you believe? Because you said go read what other people are writing about Christianity. I believe that this is our source. So we go to the Bible if we want to know what the early Christians thought and the consistent views of the church. You just go to the Bible.
So the authors of the New Testament, what do you think would have happened if you put them in a room together? They would have torn each other's throats out. Not literally, but they're theologically opposed.
No, we had some differences that were pointed out in the book of Acts.
No, but so when you read like certain epistles, right, and they're like, no, this group, they're all evil, they're going to hell. That's like other people writing other letters in the New Testament.
But see, I don't see, Nathan, that's the belief of Christianity in the early followers. If you want to know what it is, you don't go to Origen, who's not around till the 4th century. You go to this book right here. That's the earliest attestations and of eyewitness accounts to Jesus's crucifixion.
Yeah, I'm saying you do it all though, because like if you're then aware of what Origen's got to say about it, if you're aware of what, like for example, if you're aware of the Epistle of Barnabas, which many of the church fathers are actually taking as scripture, but because the New Testament isn't just canonized like that, right? And this is the thing, you've got to actually see it, the book, for what it is. And you've got to see these other texts for what they are. And then you can get you can say, okay, formally, right, these aren't included in the canon, these other texts.
So let me say it. So it's fair for me to say that from your view, you would craft your own Bible. You don't necessarily follow the epistles. You don't follow what Paul said.
I can't reinvent history. History is what it is. I'm sat here today, and I have to try and make sense of it to the best of what using like the tradition of the ecclesial communities that I'd be nested in, right? But then also my reason to the best of my ability, staying intellectually honest, what historians have to say, like, Ian and Laura doing PhDs in New Testament, right? I'm not going to just go, well, all that's nonsense because I'm committed to prophecy and stuff. I'm going to go, there's actually some value in the like 10 years you've both spent studying this stuff. And I'm going to like listen to what you've got to say about the scholarship and things like that. And I've found that in doing that, you can still be like, there's something really valuable in Christianity, and I'm going to be a Christian and stay intellectually honest, and I don't have to like harmonize and synthesize and concoct ad hoc stories about everything and try and then retreat to like the Kalam, and it doesn't quite work. But
well, let me just say something. I want to correct myself. I was wrong on Origen. Okay, so I just see somebody corrected me in the thing. I was confusing Origen with Eusebius, and so what I said about Origen with respect to Constantine, that's actually Eusebius. So I want to correct that. And he was born. I was also incorrect about the dates. He was born. It looks like here he died in 254, and he was born around 185, according to what I just found. So let me correct that. But it's still late 2nd century, not around to the eyewitness accounts. That's all I want to say with Origen.
Right. I mean, were all the eyewitnesses around for the eyewitness accounts, or is there any like that? It's way more complicated than. I mean, I'm not saying that Origen just has it all right, but I'm saying that there are a bunch of like geniuses who converted from like Platonist schools of philosophy and tried to synthesize this thing, and like they're really useful for understanding what happened.
Classical theism was heavily influenced by Platonism, so like that's why like I don't like when they describe God as omnipresent, all those omnis and everything. That's more of like a philosophical description of God, and they try to sort of make the Bible a philosophy, but I think the Bible is more of a history book. So, and like the early Christians were more about love and salvation, and then later it became like a lot of this like philosophy, and I think the institutions kind of got corrupted and lost the message of love and salvation is like the first most important.
Some of that. Let me just say something.
I'm sorry, if I could say just one thing. Getting to even talking to each other here, what you're doing is you're getting differences of opinions and views, and that kind of builds up on what your belief is. So what Nathan is saying is, as I would say, is you gather as much intelligence as you can from anybody else's point of view. If you got the mind to take one person's point of view, then why not take a person's point of view who has a much better knowledge of the subject matter, more history of it, and then it'll build on what you know and things you don't know. You add on to it, so it kind of the more you know, is the way I see it.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. More you know, the better. What's funny though is they've found there's an old saying that says that what is it? The ignorance is bliss, things like that. And the interesting thing is the happiest people a lot of times tend to be the least educated one. From what I see, I feel very happy. I'm highly educated, but some of the
it's not only a
happiest
saying. It's not only a saying. Ignorance is bliss. You can actually see it in America. Just to got your door.
No, you do see it in some. I mean, you do. You see it in some places.
Oh,
sure.
definitely. Yeah.
So listen, you guys, I'm getting up on 2:00 here. I've been on for a while. Can I go around and have each of you maybe give a little? Yeah, Randall.
The reason I came in here is because the title of the video. Is it possible to spend a few minutes on that?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
It's not. We don't usually do that when we do these open hangouts.
Well, actually, let's wrap it. Let's go around, starting then with you, Randolph. If we could just go around, maybe say a little bit about yourself, how people can find you, and what you maybe think about the title of the video. That'd be maybe a good way to get this.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it, and holding this opening discussion, this open discussion. I think it's great. I am the founder of an organization here in Canada called Canadian Atheists. We started in 2014. We advocate for atheists to be not mistreated just for not believing in deities. And so we counter vilification. We're trying to end the stigma that does occur. We don't have as big a problem here as some other countries, but it's still, I think, a worthwhile effort because it's a demographic that I care about very much. So you can find out more about the Canadian Atheists at www.canadianatheists.ca. I also have a YouTube channel at youtube.com/Randolph Richardson. And please remember, my name is spelled Randolf. Spell check might try to change it on you or autocorrect. So, my thoughts on the title, Is Atheism Dead? Is that this question isn't really well suited to what atheism is, because to me and to most atheists I know, the word atheism just means not believing in deities. So it's not really a position, even it's a classification. And so I'm part of this demographic of people who don't believe in deities. So it's not something that I think would be necessarily dead or alive. But the demographic itself is definitely alive and well, as there are people all over the world who are a part of it and who are increasingly promoting it. So if you wanted to look at it from that perspective, I think it is a growing demographic. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's fair. And I will say in the United States, from the Pew Research, atheism has grown a little bit in the United States. We've gone from 1.8% of the population just maybe a decade or so ago to about 3.1% of the population right now. And about 4% of our population says that they are agnostic. And so that means there's about 7% of people who either say that they do not believe in God, they lack the belief in God, or they do not know whether they're positioned to be able to have belief in God. And so we've got a population that from the Christian perspective, we need to reach. So
90% of the people act like there's no God.
Well,
that's true. A lot of people do act like there's no God. That's true.
Yeah, it's different here in Canada. The way we view atheism and agnosticism as distinctly separate classifications, and with agnosticism being epistemological about knowing, whereas atheism about not believing. Right, so it's different how they're divvied up. I find the Pew Research study on that to be dubious at best. Normally, Pew Research is pretty good for doing their research well and putting in controls and running the statistics properly. But the U.S. is a hard one because there's a lot of people who are also under pressure to not publicly identify as a non-believer, and so that's because there are some issues in certain areas. So I do question the accuracy of the results on that particular study, but it is one nonetheless that you referred to that does publish those numbers. So I won't disagree with that part, at least. Yeah. And thanks again, and thanks to everybody in the audience for being here. And it's a pleasure to get to speak with all of you, and to finally get a chance to speak with you, SJ. And I
Thank you.
wouldn't mind speaking with you again in the future.
Sure. Yeah. Let me know when you want to come on. No problem.
Okay.
So let's go to Nathan.
Hey, I have a channel called Digital Gnosis, and in terms of the topic, is atheism dead? Well, evidently no, as we have at least one atheist here, right? I mean, I'd agree with the sentiment about it's not exactly one coherent movement. There are some organizations who are clearly about atheism, and you could say, you know, that organization could cease to exist, whatever. But in terms of individuals with beliefs, I think there'll always be people who don't have belief in gods, or lack beliefs in gods, whatever the definition is you want to go with. In terms of philosophical atheism, I think that there's a really strong case to be made for the position, with people like Graham Oppy, J.L. Schellenberg, Elliot Sober, Paul Draper, and others who really coherently and strongly put together the case, a philosophical case for atheism. And also, like, naturalized metaphysics is big, and philosophy of mind from a naturalist perspective, which would tend to be in conflict with traditional Christian metaphysics, has made a lot of progress recently as well. So I actually think that rather than being dead, that atheism is growing, at least in the West, and that's what the Pew Research, demographics show as well. And that just seems to be a description of a state of affairs or not. I mean, it seems like one could make a rhetorical point if they're opposed to an atheism to just say, well, it's dead, so you shouldn't be one or something. Like, it's but that just isn't an accurate description of what's going on in reality. So it would be false from that point of view.
Yeah, well, I can say, coming from your perspective, now we have people from all around the globe today on our channel, which is great. But coming from your perspective, in your part of the world, atheism most certainly is become much larger. In Western Europe, Northern Europe, I definitely see trends towards growing atheism into huge numbers, actually, much bigger than in the United States. So whoever the polls are coming out, that's just what I'm seeing. So P. Mars, what do you have to say?
Well, I can say I'm studying propaganda, right? And I try and think outside the box, so I might have some like offensive or weird opinions. So forgive me, I guess. I guess if I offended anyone. It's not like I'm a hateful person. I believe in love and loving your enemies, and I just believe in truth, even if it's offensive. I want to know the truth, so I'm just expressing myself and trying to think outside the box. So yeah, God bless everyone, and thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. And I agree with you on wanting to know the truth. I think we do need to look at all sides of history if possible, and to uncover the stuff that's going on, that if there is something bad in the community or bad in our past, it needs to be uncovered. We shouldn't shove it under the table. It needs to be known. So Plastic Jesus.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. And nice meeting everybody here. And I just want to say, not too much about me, but I really dig watching your channel. I find it very interesting, and I really dig Nathan's channel. He has a lot of smart, interesting guys on there. I didn't mean to bust anybody's chops today and get too far into it, but I really dig watching you guys, and it's very interesting on the subject matter, and I learned a lot from you. And thank you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. And how about Michael?
Hey, I'm more of a consumer of information than producer, so I don't really have much of an online presence. I like to go on streams and listen. As far as the question goes, yeah, I'd agree with Nathan. I think there's quite compelling arguments in favor of atheism. I'd add his list, Quentin Smith and J. Howard Sobel. Unfortunately, they're no longer alive, but I think there's some pretty interesting arguments in favor of that position. So in that sense, no, I don't think it's dead. I don't really keep up with the statistics, nor am I incredibly interested in how many people are atheists, but I think there's some very, very good arguments they have on their side of the table.
Yeah, well, I think the atheist argument problem of evil is probably one of the biggest challenges. If there's a loving God, why would he allow evil in the world? That's a difficult challenge that we can address on another channel. I mean, another stream, because that would take a long time to unpack. But just to counter a little bit on what you guys said, just pointing out, C.S. Lewis is a great person to go read his stuff if you haven't read it yet. And he's an example of a person who was once an atheist who came to Christianity. J. Warner Wallace is another one who was an atheist. Lee Strobel. I know I'm naming people that some of you might kind of disagree with completely, but I just wanted to point out a few people who were atheists who saw the light, if you will. So,
yeah, I didn't mean to say that there weren't any arguments in favor of theism. I was just talking about atheism because that was the question. But yeah, I think there's good arguments on both sides. Although I wouldn't say Strobel would be an example there. But I think there's some good people.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Please remember, please like and subscribe. Do come back on Wednesday, because I'm going to have Standing for Truth on my channel, and I'm forgetting exactly what time we said. I think I said it at 4:00 p.m. Eastern. So please come back on then. I also, on August 11th, I'm going to be having Prophet David McGuire come on my channel and talk about some of the miracles that he's experienced and what led him to Christianity and Jesus. And so we're going to do that soon. If any of you are interested in coming on my channel, just email me or leave a comment here. If you'd like me to set up another open mic at a particular time, because I run these sort of randomly, so I know I need to start locking in a time so I can get some regular watchers here. But if there is a good time for you that you think, hey, that would be a great time to have a stream pretty a weekly stream or something like that, let me know. The only 2 days that I'm almost always super busy on are Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so other days I have a little bit more flexibility. So you guys just let me know if you'd like to come back. And everyone, please like and subscribe and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you so much, everybody. So I'm ending.